You know, guys, we're getting pretty close to E3 now, and that's a great time for gamers. It's almost like Christmas time for gamers, because we get to see all these new games get released on stage, or at least announced, sometimes released. Sometimes they'll say, oh, this game's out tomorrow, or they do that thing where they say, oh, check under your seat, everyone's getting an Xbox. That doesn't affect us. But the fact that these big games are announced there really has turned E3 into a big show. You know, it's like where you go there and it's like a party and games are being announced. Every company has an announcement to make usually, and there's always like big parties going on there, and it's generally a lot of fun. Every company has their own presentation, and for the most part, they take that publicity and they try to give us the best possible game. And I've loved E3 for a long time, and now we're getting to a point where we can go back and look at some of the older E3s. In fact, that's what I'm going to start doing here leading up to E3. It's going to be called The Road to E3, where we go back and we look at some older ones, and hopefully there's video footage of some kind, because back then we don't have what we have now, where we can stream stuff on Twitch. Like, for example, when Ubisoft shows their presentation, we can just log on to a web browser and we can watch the entire presentation streamed. Wasn't like that a while ago. So we're going to take a look, guys, today at Nintendo 2004 E3 presentation. It was one of my favorites overall. I have a couple favorites from every company, and I wanted to start with this one because this one's probably at the top. It's probably like my top three, might even be my favorite one. It had pretty much everything. It had some great game announcements, had one of the best crowd reactions you'll ever see, and it had a new system get announced that ended up being one of the best-selling systems of all time. So, you know what? Let's take a look at this, guys, and see what it was like back in 2004, especially if some of you are a little younger and have never seen this. Sit back, because it's a lot of fun. Now, before we get started here, guys, with the video, let me kind of paint the picture for you. This was a time for Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft where they were in direct competition. Like, you know how now Nintendo pretends almost like the others don't exist and kind of do their own thing? Wasn't like that now. This is when Nintendo was competing on a power standpoint. So the GameCube, for example, was more powerful than the PS2 and was less powerful than the Xbox, but could do things that the Xbox had an issue with, things like shaders, things like that. So they were right there with them. And this E3 was coming at a time when Nintendo would have been in their harvest year, like people like to say, where games will come out because they have a decent install base. Now, they had just dropped the GameCube to a ridiculous price, now that we look back on it, of $99.99. Yes, the GameCube, a current system, was $100 at the time, which was amazing. You could go out and get a GameCube for $100. It was crazy. And then, of course, something like Smash Bros. Melee was already out. Metroid Prime was already out. They had a decent selection, Mario Sunshine. But then they really wanted to kick it up a notch. So this entire E3 was about, at first, the Game Boy Advance, the GameCube, and then eventually the DS. So the first thing they had to figure out was, how do they get your attention? How do they get the people in attendance their attention? And that was pretty straightforward. I mean, you go out there on stage and you tell them you are there to kick some ass.
My name is Reggie. I'm about kicking ass. I'm about taking names.
Now, that's fine and all. I feel like they probably shouldn't have used someone as big and intimidating as Reggie, because if you look at him, he's a big guy. I mean, I feel like the people in the front row were like, oh, cool, he's here to kick ass. Where are the exits again, just so we know? Because if you look at Reggie, if he went on a rampage, it looks like it would probably take 6 to 7 tranquilizer darts to take him down for a power nap. Now, after the introduction, they went ahead and showed a couple things. They showed Resident Evil 4, because that was not out yet. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, that had not come out yet. And really after that, they just started going into game after game, and it really started punching home the fact at this point that the GameCube had a good library and it was cheap. And it was at this point, after they put that little video package together, that Reggie thought it was a good idea. Let's take some shots at Sony and Microsoft real quick.
So let me draw a comparison. One of our competitors is a manufacturer in Japan who wants to capture every one of your entertainment dollars, transporting all your content between all your electronics devices on their memory sticks. We're not that company.
Yes, it was pretty obvious that Reggie was talking about the PSP in this case, but also what was happening was, at the time, Sony came up with copy protection that was known as Magic Gate. It was built into a lot of their memory stick, their Pro Duos and everything, and you could only use those on certain devices like their MP3 player, their Walkman, and then eventually the PSP. And those memory cards were not cheap. You had no choice but to buy them, and at that point, they could charge what they want. And at this time, Nintendo had no memory cards for their handheld device, if you think about that, because they had the Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP. Everything was stored on the cartridge. Even with the DS, everything was still just stored on the cartridge for the most part. And really, it was an easy shot to take. It was there to take, and he took it. So it makes a lot of sense even now, because if you look back on it, that hurt the Vita big time, having proprietary memory cards. I'm surprised Sony did not learn that lesson with the PSP, although the PSP sold well. The Vita, though, man, those memory cards, those hurt.
And there's another company out there who doesn't care what you do as long as you do it on their operating system.
And then, of course, he also talks about Microsoft's OS, how they don't care what you do as long as it's on their OS. And yeah, that kind of holds up today, too, since they're just putting every Xbox game on Windows 10 in their Windows Store now. So it's interesting how these two statements are really kind of holding water today, where not as many Xbox sales are happening right now because there's no real exclusives left. They just put them on their OS as well, and it's getting less and less of a reason to buy an Xbox One when you have a decent PC. And this is where this next part really shows how different Nintendo's presentations are at E3 now, because they break into a full-on PowerPoint slide here. They bring someone else out, and he starts just going through all of the different things about the GameCube that are better than the PS2 and the Xbox. Some of the slides are kind of ridiculous too, by the way. They really cherry pick statistics. They don't put up, how many overall lifetime sales have happened, because the PS2's bar would be massive. They use very, very large bars between the two for differences of anything like 0.1. The bar is much larger. So they definitely did this on purpose to try to drive home anything they could about the GameCube being better, when at the time the Xbox wasn't selling as well. The GameCube was selling better, but the PS2 was just crushing it at the time. It's just funny because we go from PowerPoint slides where we're looking at almost like a business conference, and then fast forward back to 2015, 11 years later, and we're being treated with Muppets. Now, after that whole PowerPoint thing happens, they talk about the Game Boy Advance a little bit. They show a few games, things like Mario Party, and then they kind of go on to show some GameCube stuff. They even show Paper Mario 2 as a title. So that was their original title, was just Paper Mario 2, until they figured out they wanted to call it Thousand Year Door. After that, though, we have to get on to the new system coming out. And guys, that was the Nintendo Dual Screen. It wasn't even really called the DS. And rumors and everything going around at the time, they thought it was just going to be called Nintendo Dual Screen.
I think the Dual Screen is going to be amazing. It's about changing the way you play.
My friends were talking about the Dual Screen coming out, and I can't wait for it to come out.
I can't wait to see it.
And yeah, that's how it really was, guys. And you'd go into EB Games or GameStop, and the people at the counter, if you start talking to them, they would think it was called the Dual Screen as well. That's just how it was. You go to school, you'd talk about it. And it really wasn't until this conference where they came out and they said, it's not called the Dual Screen. It has two screens. It's called the Nintendo DS, though.
This is Nintendo DS.
And it's really amazing how different it looks today when you really look at like a DS Lite or even just the regular DS. It's interesting how much things will change from there. And then they released it that fall at a price of $150, which is pretty competitive because the PSP, which came out later on, was much more expensive. My favorite part, though, is this is how you know it's 2004. The reaction of the crowd when they announce Wi-Fi is just amazing.
Wi-Fi means you can connect via the net. It's beyond online. It's no line.
You're taking the photo instantaneously, you're putting the photo out there on the line.
Is it online?
Yeah, I'm putting my photos out on the line.
Yeah, guys, Wi-Fi was this big back then, and it's really funny because game systems didn't really have Wi-Fi like that built in. The original Xbox had like a Wi-Fi dongle you could get. It also worked technically because it was just a wireless bridge. It also worked on the PS2 as well. But other than that, I mean, we didn't really have it. The PSP, of course, had it built in the following year. But, I mean, that was new to a lot of people. I mean, keep in mind, guys, this is when there were no real smartphones out there, like, at all. Definitely not mainstream like they are now. And the cool kids at your school were the ones with the Razr flip phones. Yeah, this is that time period, guys. And really, after the DS was announced, the rest was history. I mean, the thing goes on to sell like 150 million units. It's right up there with the PS2 in terms of best-selling systems. It's by far the best-selling handheld that'll probably ever be made. I don't know if it'll ever be touched because mobile devices are out now and those are spread so thin, it's going to be tough for anything that's a dedicated gaming device to ever reach that number. So after putting over the DS, talking about all the big features and everything, they start to close out the show. But they had to give us one more thing, right? I mean, there was something else kind of really just an elephant in the room at the time. So if you weren't around when Wind Waker came out, on the GameCube, there was a lot of backlash about the visuals, mostly because they had just shown in 2000, I think at Space World, they just showed a tech demo where it had Link and Ganon fighting, and people were like, wow, this is going to be great. They're going to do like a realistic Zelda using the power of the GameCube. And later on, we end up finding out that Wind Waker was going to use a more like cel-shaded approach. And a lot of people didn't like that. I liked it because I thought it was really cool looking and I thought you could show emotion a lot better that way. There were a lot of people, though, that were really frustrated that things like the original Xbox were getting very realistic looking games and the GameCube it was getting Wind Waker. Despite it being a fun game, people just did not like that. So the build-up was massive. Rumors were going around that there was a realistic Zelda game in the works. Pretty much right away after Wind Waker came out, everyone was like, yeah, but we know that realistic one's coming soon. And this was it, guys. This was the spillover, the explosion, everything right here when this trailer went up. And guys, that crowd is ridiculous, and it's so loud that what happened was the way this footage is out right now is because GameStop actually sold these as DVDs that you could buy. That you could buy the entire E3 showing for your choice that year, whether it was the Nintendo one, Microsoft, or Sony. So what they did was they grabbed this footage and they had to mute the crowd because you're just too loud. There's live footage here. And then there's the muted footage here. And that's probably, guys, this is probably the biggest crowd reaction I've ever seen at E3, straight up. Like, this is it. If you look at crowd reactions, it's this, it's like Smash Bros. Melee, and then it's like Halo 2. There are some other ones that are a little smaller, but like collectively, you can just hear the crowd so relieved to see a realistic Zelda game because people have been wanting it since they realized that the GameCube was strong enough to do it. And I mean, this was it. This was the game that was going to show all those people out there who would make fun of the GameCube for being kiddie games. Look, it's a realistic Zelda game. It's going to be rated teen. We didn't find out about that until later, but it's going to be rated teen, and it's going to be a straight up action Zelda game that looks awesome. It looks real. It shows how strong the GameCube really is. And I know what you're thinking, guys. The only way they could top that entire showing right there with Twilight Princess and the super dramatic and everything is to put Miyamoto out there with a sword and shield. But they would never, oh my god, they did that. Yeah, they put him out there with a sword and shield straight up. And I've often looked at this and wondered if this was that moment where he was kind of swinging the sword and the shield around on stage, where he kind of subconsciously or even in his mind was like, wow, this would be a lot of fun. Maybe this is a game, maybe this is a mechanic for the game down the road, and maybe he's sitting there piecing together Skyward Sword after the showing and everything. He gets backstage, he's like, man, that'd be really cool if we could do that eventually, because guys, the following year, the Wii gets announced. And of course, Twilight Princess goes there with a subpar mechanic for swinging your sword, and then they eventually come out with Skyward Sword where it was much better. But yeah, guys, I like the older E3s. I like looking back at them. I think it's really cool to see what things were like back then. I mean, this was a while ago, 2004. This is about 13 years ago, guys. That's a bit. And it really shows how different things are from then to now, specifically with technology or the people who are in the audience, which are no longer fans like it was there. It's more press that are there to type up on their laptop and report instant information right away. A lot of this information you're seeing here did come out around that time when it was happening, but it was a little delayed. It wasn't right away because people in the crowd were probably about 80% fans and the other 20% were mostly media. So it's cool to see. We'll do some more, guys. I want to do some on Sony and Microsoft as well. Microsoft had a pretty good one the year prior, and then they showed off Halo 2 and everything, and that was really big. And Sony has usually done very well at E3. It's more about finding the video files. Video can be kind of tough to find on this stuff, but I'll keep you guys in the loop on that. I hope you're enjoying this. We'll do a road to E3, and it'll be a lot of fun. I'm really excited for E3 this year because I think there's going to be some big announcements that kind of give me that nostalgia feel from back in the day when people got real excited about this stuff. So that's it for now, guys. I will see you next time.